Hello, friends. My name is Stinkers Mallooh, and when I'm not working my day job as a 19th century New York City gangster, I play the role of world's most eminent typologist struggling in obscurity here on YouTube of Host Eric.
Talking with famous people.
A lot of times we like to do this thing where, well, the cognitive function, metaphorically, as a metaphor, what is it, Well, in this case, let's pretend metaphorically it's smoothness. Smoothness would be on an axis with correctness, that's TI and FE. It would also be on an axis with TE, which is to say, every time you know where FE is in the stack, you know where TE is in the stack as well. Smoothness to self-sustainingness, FE smoothness to authenticity. So if you were to think of TE as a basic frame of reference that says, I'm going to solve it myself, get someone else to do it, is FE on the backstack. Solve it myself links also to TI. Check the legitimacy of solving. TI is a necessary precondition sometimes to solving it myself, but it primarily can only get in the way of it or slow it down. It's going to have to either be ignored or countervalued or blind or automatic slave, Solve it myself. What's important to solve? We're going to begin with this scenario. This lady here is Judy, and she's come into the garage, and she's walked in. Okay, now, she's walked into a garage where the scene is set as follows. There's a shelf over here with 4 things on it. There's a broom right here. And there's a makeup kit on the ground next to the shelf and under the broom. You can see what the things are. They're numbered and named here. This is a bottle of chloroform. This is a rag. This is a coil of rope. This is a roll of duct tape. This is a broom. And this is a makeup kit. We did take a little snapshot of reality the moment when Judy has entered the garage before anything else happens, and we ask ourselves, what is this going to be revealing regarding cognitive functions? I'm an NE Dom. That means NE is an absolute value for me, it also means SI is fourth. It's an instrumental value. If I was an INTP, it would be NE that was the instrumental value and SI that was the absolute value. But the instrumentality would still predominate the frame of reference. Kind of stumbling around here in terms of extroverted intuition. When I'm extrovertedly intuiting like that, I'm not remembering exactly what I was going to say, which would have been the SI thing to do. If I had practiced the speech 10 times until I had memorized, that's an SI way to approach the language such that you render it into an experientially imprinted thing in you, And you can see that NE and SI have an unbalanced compromise in me in a lot of different ways. For example, my SI just remembers how to play the chords, but my extroverted intuition says what to play. So when I'm freestyling something, which is my most comfortable way of playing, then I'm not remembering what I played before to know what I'm going to play. I'm making it up as I go along. When I am playing something I've played before, chances are, except for a few songs, I'm going to be reading the chords and lyrics and playing it because I don't really remember my songs. I only remember a few of them. All the lyrics, all the chords, everything, I only remember a few of them, Considering I've got hundreds of them, that's the thing. You can't both have hundreds of songs and have them all memorized, because there's an unbalanced compromise there. If you're going to be, I'm going to have all my songs memorized, you're not going to make very many of them, and vice versa. In SE Dom, you have SC as an absolute value that's voluntary and conscious. You've got SI as an absolute value that's involuntary but robust. What's the difference between voluntary and involuntary? Breathing is voluntary in the sense that I can take control of my breathing. It can be automatic if I don't pay attention to it. but it's voluntary in that I can stop breathing for a minute if I want to. My heartbeat is not voluntary in the same regard. I can't stop my heart from beating for a minute. I don't have that kind of express autonomous control over it. So we can think of cognitive functions as being equivalent to that. And SE and SI are the equivalent of breathing and the heart. If SE is the breathing, then SI is the heart. And if SI is the breathing, then SE is the heart. One of them you can do autonomously, but in order to do it autonomously with any good impact, you need to assume the other one as an autopilot kind of effective, reliable thing you don't have to voluntarily and consciously pay attention to.
Fizzle up my whizzle, fizzle up my nizzle, fizzle up my shizzle today.
I've heard it plenty of times is that SE is scanning the environment. That is correct. I agree with that. That SE does scan the environment. So it notices things then. In other words, SE is looking for changes to the status quo. They want to see something that's different than it was. In order to be able to constantly be noticing things that are different or changing or moving or evolving in the moment, it needs to also have a good hold on, but be paying no attention to what's static, what used to be and is the same. And that's the SI ignoring in an SE DOM.
Pew, 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 pew.
Now, if you look at SE and NE is other value, other side to it. So if I'm executing SE change to the environment, it means I've noticed something and impacted it in a way that shakes things up a bit. If I walk over to your table and knock over your beer, it changes the dynamic of the moment dramatically for both parties. I'm referring specifically to a scene in Cobra Kai in which the ESTP main character he's sitting at a bar and an ESTP girl comes up to hit on him and pretends to accidentally knock over his beer and says herself something, well, now I knocked over your beer, I'm going to have to buy you a new one. Now, obviously, it might not play out like that. You know, it might be that you walk up and you try that move and the person's like, you know what, I'm really not in the mood for these games right now. My mother just died and my grandfather died too and my dog's very sick and I just had a colonoscopy. So I really don't want your little flirtiness here, please. It could go like that, you know. That's expert intuition saying the obvious NI here. Oh, that's a good move. The person's gonna be like, yeah, okay, sure, sit down, buy me a beer. I mean, if they do it smooth, right? If they do FE sound, it's a good trick.
With the trade winds blowing, yeah, 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 yeah.
So Judy walks in, and depending on her cognitive function stack, she's going to deal with this in different ways. Let's just do the perceiving functions right now. Let's say she's SI high up there, 1 or 2. Turns out, this used to be on one of these shelves over here. This pretty makeup used to be on one of these shelves. And then Bob moved it and replaced it with these things over here. So if she's an SI DOM or tool function, she might walk into the garage and say, hey, who moved my makeup kit? If she's an SE DOM, she might walk in and go, hey, look at these new things over there. There's a new bottle and a new rag and a new rope and a new tape. And my makeup's been moved and okay. If she's an NI DOM, she might come in and say, oh my God, Bob is planning an abduction. Why else would he have moved her makeup and replaced it with chloroform, rag, rope, and duct tape? And then, if she were an NI DOM, she might also say, and what in the world is he going to do with that broom? If she's an NI DOM, she might walk in and say, it looks kind of like an abduction, but I am pretty sure that's not what's going on here. I know Bob was talking about his rehearsals for the role he's playing in, the play they made out of the kidnapping of Charles Lindbergh's baby. I bet those are props for that, probably. Why did he move my makeup kit? Because he's inconsiderate, and the broom's probably irrelevant. That seems just as likely a story as he's actually going to abduct somebody. He's a nice guy. I know him for a long time, SI. I've known him for a long time. He's never done anything like that before. I'm married to him. He's the father of my kids. He works hard. He's a good guy. I have no reason to assume that just because I see these things, and where would he even get chloroform? And would it be misspelled like that? These are important questions that Judy might ask if she were an NEDOM, you know? There'll be sunrise and sunset forever, my darling, till the end never arrive. All right, let's say SE1, NI4. They might go, oh look, there's a bottle and a rag and a rope and a duct tape and a broom and a makeup. And you go, wait. Maybe double take, you know, the sort of comedic movie double take. What? Chloroform, rag, rope, and duct tape? Huh. So, in theory, if you wanted to imagine somebody not shifting into NI, they would just notice everything without putting two and two together. When you first looked at this, and I didn't tell you that was Judy's makeup kit who had been moved by Bob, and Bob had replaced it with those things, you might have thought the makeup kit was part of this whole scene, right? But turns out, when I tell you the story, it wasn't part of it. Before, I told you that the broom was just there as a red herring. It's not part of anything. It's in the garage. Well, you might have thought it was part of something. That you could imagine, and you know, an NI polar person, if you say, what's relevant, what do you note here, NI polar person? I go, poor use of space. If you were to say an SI person who's you know, so that's like not using any NI, or linking it to his own experience in his own garage in his head somehow, you know. If they're using a shit ton of SI, they might say something like, oh, well, I would put the breakables on the lower shelves because they're more likely to get tipped over. I know from experience I've broken a lot of these. You can see that if you're an NI-DOM, you might know immediately. You're probably going to discard or disregard your own experience and distrust Bob even if you've known him for years. And if you're an NI-DOM, you're probably not going to think of these other possibilities. You're ignoring those in order to resolutely coalesce what is. On this one, noticing changes versus noticing the status quo, noticing changes versus recognizing the significance of those changes, and noticing changes versus riffing off those changes. That would be SE's relationship with SI, SE's relationship with NI, and SE's relationship with NE. If you are always archiving stuff, then you have fewer new ideas because you can only archive so many new ideas before the new idea generation overwhelms your capacity to archive them if you're always making new ideas, right? I'm not thinking, oh, I've already covered this, whatever it is, even if I have, because that would be referencing what I've already completed or left uncompleted. If I know where SI is, I also know where SE is. Unlike the SE DOM goes in and says, oh, I noticed this, I noticed this, I noticed this, right? The SI DOM goes, whoa. This is not old. Well, what happened here? I expected it to be old. And I want it to be old. I want it to be as I left it. And you've messed it up. You have changed how I had it before. Now, the thing is, the person's mostly paying attention to how they've had it before. But, just as in the other directionality, in order to be very effective at knowing how it had it before, they have to be able to recognize when it's changed from that. In other words, their grasp on how it was before can't be super fragile, right?
What a special cognitive function video we're enjoying today.
And then you look at SI, and this is where, when you have the same kind of functions, these are the two knowledge functions, that they're competing, and one of them is the master and the other is more or less the slave, because if you're an SI Dom, you are almost always going to prioritize your own experience over your observations about the world or intuitions about the world or realities of identities outside of you. And even when you don't, it's going to be through a general framing of your own knowledge anyway. So, in other words, the NI is always going to be in service of the SI. And the SI is absolute value, NI is instrumental in the SI Dom.
Lots of information to share with friends makes me say hooray.
Okay, now let's look at FI. FI goes to TE, that's the unbalanced compromise, in which if you're an FI Dom, that means you're much better at knowing what you want than you are at how to get it. And how to get it is always subservient to what you want, which means you could possibly be impulsive. What you want now changes frequently, whereas planning and executing, attaining what you want can sometimes take time.
Oh no, you can't fondle that. That's not allowed.
FI, same value on the side. If you're an FI Dom, it's absolute value of authenticity. Well, you need to be able to recognize inauthenticity, even though you're not consciously looking for it. That's 1-5. You need to be very strong at 5 without consciously or voluntarily engaging it much.
Please just don't fondle that in front of this crowd.
FI or TI, well, that's the same kind of function. So again, it's that master-slave relationship. If FI is 1, absolute value, very important dominant function, then TI is 8, instrumental value, always in the service of the dominant. I will finagle, or you will finagle. We will finagle together. You might say TI is scrutiny of justification. If you're going to phrase these things in terms of scrutiny of, right? And remember, these are my handwritten notes. So I don't include a lot of qualifications. So try not to bust my chops too hard about sort of the metaphorical quality of these. Scrutiny of justification, well, then TE would be scrutiny of impacts. Scrutiny of justification over scrutiny of presentation, FE. Well, how correct is it versus how agreeable is it for the viewers? How user-friendly is it, TI, scrutiny of justification. FI, scrutiny of wants. How much do I want that? And, how much am I willing to compromise? Finagle. FI is the compromising function, basically. It says, I know I can't have everything I want because I want lots of things. And that some wants are just a momentary impulse and some wants persist for time. And I need to be able to calculate which of those wants I ought to actually direct my attention towards attaining and which I don't want to direct my attention towards attaining. I have a very poor calculus of wants. I've wanted a audio compressor, an external audio compressor, for a long ass time. I frequently go drop $200 at the weed store, but I can't seem to go spend $200 on a compressor. Why not? I have very bad FI in the sense that I don't do a good job of calculating my wants against each other.
Look at me dance, look at me dance, look at me dance, with my feet and my hands and my arms.
Thanks for watching. I love you very much. And remember, if you'd like to get typed by me, I am the world's best professional typologist. I understand it better than everybody else, and I probably have more experience typing people than anybody else. Maybe not anybody else, but certainly I have more experience typing people well than anybody else. And you can view my typing sessions. Some people like to publish. You don't have to at all. If you want to get typed, it's entirely up to you whether it's published or not. But some people do choose publishing. You can view those, and you can see that I make a very concerted effort to both understand the person, understand their mental processes, and link them to a carefully parsed out understanding of the framework as well as I can, better than anybody else. So if you were considering getting typed, I would recommend myself. I'm a little biased, but it's a good recommendation. I give my own self Yelp review of 5 stars plus 1,000,000 points. All right, thanks for watching. Don't forget to eat plenty of cheese. Oh, also like and sub. I'm not so good at the FB. I'm not that smooth, right? I'm just not that smooth. Try as you might, you just can't hide, 'cause you're mistyped. And I've been waiting to pull you over all night. Type police, type police. Please pull that guy over. He says he's INTP, but seems extroverted sensing to me. I think he's ESFP or type police.